Welcome everyone to Screams After Midnight. I am Pierre, and joining me as always is Tim.
Thanks for having me.
That's where we're starting this one on, is it? Okay, this is our horror movie podcast. We get together, we've watched a horror movie, we talk about it. It's really quite that simple. This is part of... actually, is this part of Vampire Month? I don't know, this is confusing because we're so far ahead. This is part of Vampire Month, I'm sure it is. There's definitely a vampire in it, so I'm pretty sure it's part of Vampire Month. If you're wondering why I'm so confused, because we're recording so many episodes in advance because Tim's going on paternity leave early for the first few months of next year. Well, I say next year. It'll be this year when you see this. So happy 2021, everyone! But for us, it's actually still October 2020, and
that's right.
Who knows what the future's brought? Maybe there'll be a vaccine by January 2021. Who knows?
For vampires?
Yes, for vampirism. Yes. Okay. That's the pandemic that's currently brought the world to its knees. Yes. But yeah, so this is actually also a franchise we've been working through. We did the original Hammer 1958 Dracula some time ago, and then we did, for Octoberthon, we did Brides of Dracula. So the third film in said franchise is Dracula, Prince of Darkness from 1966. So,
not to be confused with John Carpenter's Prince of Darkness from 1980 something.
That is true. It's not the same film. I'm glad you pointed that out, Tim. Very important. This is what is notable in that it brought Christopher Lee back because he was missing from the second one. Although we have lost Peter Cushing.
They couldn't find him.
Yes, they couldn't find him. He was just missing for a few years. But we did lose Peter Cushing, so there's no Van Helsing. They were his brides. We talked about this heavily in that review, Tim. Like, it was called Brides of Dracula, but none of the women in it had ever met Dracula. Some other douchebag vampire who no one had ever heard of was the lead villain. It was weird. False advertising.
Yeah. Like Gerald or something.
Sure. I remember what he looked like, but yeah, I could never tell you what his name was. I have no idea what he was called. Which is, potential... saying something, but so yeah, this came out in 1966, and it does have continuity. In fact, hell, the movie even opens with a previously on Dracula kind of section. It shows you the ending of the first movie, so it does have the continuities. It's like he's not just back randomly. There is kind of a process of getting Dracula back because he did, technically die at the end of the first movie. So we'll start spoiler free as we always do. We'll give you warnings before we go into spoilers. Welcome to the world of Hammer horrors, Dracula, Prince of Darkness. Basically, two couples end up at Dracula's castle, and there's a human being there who seems to want to try and bring Dracula back to life. That's basically it. I have nothing else to add to the plot synopsis. Tim, what did you think of Dracula, Prince of Darkness?
I didn't totally hate it. I did think it was slow in some parts, which was unfortunate. But then there were, I mean, essentially, a lot of the human stuff. I just felt kind of dragged on a bit. But I mean, I love Christopher Lee as Dracula when he, does actually show up. I, like those parts, even though, they are a bit dated, for the time. But I mean, once there was actual vampire stuff, I actually liked it quite a bit. So I mean, overall, I guess I'm just kind of like think it's okay. I don't think it's necessarily great. I don't think it's like horrible. It's just kind of in the middle for me. I didn't think I'd seen this one before, but I remembered the ending actually. I was like, oh, well, I've totally seen this ending before. So I don't know. I might have watched it in like a previous Octoberthon, maybe just like a random all right, I need a Dracula movie. That here's one I found streaming, but I felt it felt pretty new to me up until the end. I was like, oh, I've totally seen this ending before.
Yeah, I knew I'd seen this before, but I also couldn't remember anything about it except maybe the ending and like that's it's really just that. Honestly, that says a lot. I'm not super hot in this one. I find it to be very mediocre. And you said it's a bit slow. I think that's even being generous. I think this movie is painfully boring for a vast majority of its runtime. I don't even know if I think the Dracula sections are even that inspired. They kind of just feel like they're going through the motions because we wanted Dracula back, we wanted Christopher Lee back, but we don't actually have anything really for him to do. So It's just, by the numbers. He's coming for the wife of someone. They have to try and protect her, but it doesn't have any of the kind of the pacing or any of the creepiness of the first movie. Although he actually says less than this. I don't even know if Dracula has a single line of dialogue in this movie. He's pretty quiet.
Yeah, no, not that I can really think of. No,
he has his a couple times, but that's about it. He's like, but other than that, no, it's funny because you said that the human stuff, and it sounded like you were talking about a Godzilla movie, because that's how we typically talk about Godzilla movies, like, the human plots or whatever. Whereas in a vampire movie, the human plots are still kind of all of it. Like, yeah, sure, Dracula shows up, but I mean, the humans in peril are still kind of the focus of what's going on.
Yeah, I think the thing is, like, usually in other movies, though, yeah, you have a bunch of stuff with humans, but yeah, like you said, they're in peril, and a lot of it is them talking about Dracula and having to devise a plan to like overtake them and everything. Like with this though, it's like, yeah, a lot of the human stuff, it just feels like so happenstance. Like you don't, like, none of it is really like that important. Like honestly, and I watched this morning, like just pretty much right before we started recording, and honestly I couldn't even tell you like why these people were like traveling to the castle or whatever. Like I don't even really.
Well, they weren't traveling to the castle, so when we get to spoilers, we'll talk about how they end up at the castle, because it's got a little bit weird and there's questions to be raised. But they were actually traveling somewhere else to go rock climbing. That was the one detail they kind of mentioned, is that they were on vacation going rock climbing.
Big in the 60s, I guess.
Well, you say that, it's not even the 60s, technically. I mean, the movie came out in the 60s, but the movie's set in, I don't know, 1880 or something. I don't know. 1890 something. I have no idea. The characters are really bland. There's not really much to them. It's, there's the one wife, because it's two couples, essentially. I think the two guys are brothers, maybe? Is that the connection to them? Yeah. I can't remember. But there's two couples, and the older wife is kind of like constantly scared. Which, I get why she's creeped out by things, but she actually at one point outright says, like, I don't know if we'll make it till morning, but nothing actually, like, I get why she thinks things are creepy, but nothing's actually happened yet to suggest they're actually in danger. So when she said that, I was like, wait, what? You think you might die by morning? What escalated you to that point? Even though I do think the rest of them are all idiots, because they all just don't think there's anything weird about all the things that happen that lead them to the castle, when it's nothing but weird shit.
No, yeah, I mean, I agree. Yeah, like it is kind of weird, and I don't know. Yeah, the characters are just pretty bland. Nothing much to them. To me, it kind of feels like they were just trying to, kind of redo Dracula again, like the well, I guess like the I mean, maybe I'm thinking more of the like other adaptations of Dracula or whatever, but like stuff like you have like the one redhead lady kind of like reminded me of like Lucy and like the original Dracula, because she gets turned and then she's like this vampire kind of going against them and stuff. And I don't know, you have like the main couple, I'm like, all right, is this supposed to be the kind of like the Jonathan and Mina of the story? But I mean, like you kind of mentioned earlier, though, there's nothing really that interesting about them. Like you never really feel too like compelled to follow them, or to kind of go through with their journey. And then yeah, like you said, you're missing the Van Helsing, and then the like again, I do like the vampire parts when they start, like, and I agree, like I would say that they're definitely not as good as like the first Hammer Dracula movie. It seems to be lacking a bit, but I mean, yeah, it is kind of hard to deny. Like, I still do like seeing like Christopher Lee show up and all that stuff.
Yeah, there is the Van Helsing stand-ins. This I don't know, priest or whoever he is, who kind of like seems to know what he's talking about and is very stern. But it's kind of weird that he's introduced early on in the film, and then kind of just disappears for the vast majority of it. It has this problem where it takes so long to kind of get going that by the time things start, it feels like it has to kind of rush through everything else in the actual portion of the movie where Dracula's up and around and and doing stuff.
Yeah,
and,
I wish we maybe could have maybe seen more of like the world or whatever, because after you get like the flashback stuff in the beginning, yeah, you have that scene where you see this village that's like killing this woman, and they're like putting like a stake through her heart, in case she's a vampire. And I think that's when you first see the priest, and he's like kind of telling them like, no, like stop this or whatever, like not everyone's a vampire or whatever. And,
yeah,
like,
to be specific, I don't think she's alive though. I think they're not killing her; she's already dead.
oh, right,
yeah, like, but
yeah, like it's her corpse, and
yeah, they're worried that she's going to be a vampire, so they're going to stake her in the heart. And the priest comes out and says they're a bunch of superstitious fools, and that Dracula's been dead for a decade or whatever, and like, stop this nonsense.
I think that would have been much more interesting than if you have this couple or whatever journeying through this area, and they kind of get to this very odd superstitious village, and kind of being intrigued by that and saying like, oh, like why is everyone acting this way, why are you so afraid of this person that's been dead for whatever. Like I think that'd be more interesting. But yeah, they kind of just get to the castle, and the castle honestly is kind of boring until like Dracula comes back and everything.
Yeah, they have a whole thing where the human that's kind of helping Dracula, they kind of intentionally cast someone who from a distance has like a very similar build to Christopher Lee, because they do a whole fake out with his entrance where you think it might be him, and then he comes out of the shadows and it's just this butler looking dude, which is fine, it's whatever. I kind of agree though, like the idea that because of Dracula's like reputation in the vampire history and in this mythology, the idea that the townsfolk in the surrounding regions are so like superstitious about vampires that they just stake anyone who dies in case they come back is actually a really fascinating thing to delve into. And it's like, oh, this is different, and the film's not interested in being different. The film's interested in just getting to, oh, let's just redo Dracula again as best, as close as we can once we get going with some stuff. It actually, there's a couple of rules that are brought up in this. Well, one rule is brought up towards the end that I actually Googled just to see if it was a real thing. When I say real thing, I mean something that's been traditionally used with vampires before, and not just made up in this movie. And it turns out that it was. It's just not one that's used a whole lot, because I'm like, wait, that's also a weakness? Okay. News to me. But fair enough.
Is it the crossing water stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's always one that I've definitely heard of it before, but yeah, it is one that I always forget about.
Yeah, it's probably just one too many as well. Like, the vampires actually have a decent number of weaknesses, quite frankly. Yeah. Sunlight, crosses, garlic, wooden stakes. So there's actually there's enough typically to take care of a vampire if you know you're up against one. It's
also, it's always like lame stuff too. It's like, come on, you can't take a little garlic, a little lowercase t. That's gonna stop you.
Yeah, and it's one of those things as well where so much of this movie with the main characters, because they don't know about vampires, because there isn't a Van Helsing who tells them anything about vampires, that we have to kind of go through the process of them realizing what Dracula is, and realizing that, oh, a cross can defend us, that this helps, this burns them. So we have to go through that realization process, and because of that, it feels like, okay, like we've done this with this version of Dracula already. We know, in fact, we didn't even do it that much in the first Dracula, because the first Dracula, we had Van Helsing who knew about these things, and it was someone who understood what he was talking about for the most part. So missing that in this film, and having these characters have to sort of try and figure things out from scratch up until a certain point when the priest comes back into it, just kind of, I don't know, it makes it kind of tedious to sit through.
The thing that gets me, and I mean, maybe this is, because we're watching it with 2020 eyes, and, we're so inundated with, pop culture and lore, and we've seen a million vampire movies before, that it always feels like very like, yes, come on, we know this. But I mean, maybe back in the day, like, yeah, not as many people knew about Dracula or read the book. And yes, it is the third in a movie, but maybe, it was harder to rewatch stuff nowadays. So maybe they are, counting on there being a lot of newer people to watch this. But yeah, I kept thinking about, though, like, come on, this is the third movie. Like, we just want to see Dracula just to like get to him already.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's, I don't actually mind that it takes a while to get to Dracula. I think if you're going to build up your movie around teasing and sort of like, you know, when's he going to show up and like building up to his appearance, like I think that's fine. I have no problem with that conceptually. I just don't think the movie actually is that suspenseful or actually teases it enough properly. It just kind of feels like oh, we're just spending time with these dull ass characters who spend most of the time basically just deciding like, oh, should we go to the castle? Maybe we shouldn't. I mean, I know I'm a little bit creeped out by this. Very well
there's
then.
rocks at the castle we can climb.
Yes, actual line of dialogue from the movie, but not really. So, you know, I found myself being it's got all of the tropes of a Hammer Dracula style movie of this era, but none of the actual qualities I think of the first movie, which actually made it, you know, it's exciting to watch, or the creepiness, or whatever. I feel like Christopher Lee's just kind of carted out. They paid him a lot of money to show up and be Dracula, but it doesn't really feel like there's like no spark to it. There's nothing like saying, oh, this is him getting to finally do some proper Dracula stuff again. It feels like he's just kind of redoing moments from the first movie, without really, you know, outside of like revealing his chest at one point, which I suppose was new. But I mean, other than that, I don't know, pretty ho hum. Yeah, it's just a really dull movie. I have to, you know, I didn't like Brides of Dracula that much, but I think Brides was probably better than this. Because at least it felt like it had stuff happening, even if I wasn't in love with all of it.
Yeah, I mean, I really wasn't crazy about Brides, but I mean, in retrospect, though, I'd say it's more interesting at least.
Yeah, I mean that doing like its own weird things, even if it is just trying to sort of have a stand-in for Dracula, has more going for it than this movie, which is just, oh, we got Christopher Lee back, so we're just going to like kill time for like 45 minutes, and then we're going to have a remake of Dracula. Like,
pretty much.
Yeah, it's, you know, yeah. So, you know, it sucks, but hey, we'll get into spoilers. We'll get into spoilers. Although I will take this time to thank our Patreon producers at the time of recording. So thank you very much to Tyler Hess, Cindy Palacios, David Short, Born Now, Al Treisman, Christopher Moy, Brett Williams, and David Brown. You guys are all Patreon producers. That means your patrons are over $20 a month at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV. But you can, of course, support us over there for as little as $1 per month. And for that $1, you get access to our bonus episodes, which we typically will add a new one per month. Of course, there'll be a few months off as Tim's on paternity leave coming up. But there's a whole back catalogue of over 25 episodes there, which you get access to for that $1 per month. And at the $5 tier, you get early access to all the episodes by one day. You get to vote in the monthly votes, all these things. Again, some of this stuff is going to pause for a little bit because of Tim having a sired vampire child of his own. But you get access to all that stuff. So go and have a look and see if you're interested, and help keep all the content coming. But you can, of course, support us with no monies if you want. You can simply hit the like button on YouTube. And it helps us out a great ton, as well as commenting and rating the podcast on iTunes and all that stuff. So please do us the honor of all of those things. Thank you very much. So without further ado, full spoilers for Dracula Prince of Darkness. The movie opens with a recap of the ending of the first movie, and a weird kind of like diamond sort of letterbox sort of thing that's got going. I don't even know why it's doing that, but and we mentioned the scene where the priest comes out and kind of stops from staking this dead woman. From there, though, we're introduced to our four main characters. You
know, it's kind of it's kind of funny that the scene did kind of remind me like a little bit of the opening scene of Black Sunday, just like without a lot of the style and like intrigue. But I mean, just opening up with like, yeah, this village. I mean, I guess that was like more, executing like a live person, where, you know, this was just dealing with a corpse. But just the idea of like this whole town kind of gathered around.
Visually, they're not even a contest. Black Sunday's a gorgeous black and white movie. Every part of it's oozing with style and atmosphere. And the plot does let that one down a little bit. The plot's not that exciting in Black Sunday, but the visuals, oh baby, the
make
visuals
up for it.
Yeah. I mean, here the visuals are just kind of like,
just a little dull. I think unfortunately, like, you know, like this kind of movie, this is like the worry I feel like, you know, I have when I'm watching something a little older, because, you know, it's not like, you know, I don't like older movies or anything, but, yeah, sometimes you do get something like Black Sunday where it's like, all right, this is very gorgeous and compelling, and I'm glued to the screen. And then sometimes you get this where it's just like, okay, yeah, this seems very dated and pretty dull, and I can feel my mind drifting.
Mm-hmm. Yep. It's interesting to the four main characters, and they're at like a tavern or whatever, and the priest shows up and ultimately warns them not to go towards this certain town, Carlsberg, and definitely do not go to the castle if you're going to go there. Like, whatever you do, the castle, it's not even on the map, but don't go to the castle. And it's almost like, why did
as
you
soon
tell
as he
them that?
leaves, they're like, hey, should we go to the castle?
Well, yeah, because they pay the coachman, and we don't even get the scene of the coach, like, because they mentioned they got delayed because the wheel fell off, which is actually, if I recalled correctly, is actually how Mask of Satan kind of starts. There's a wheel falls off the coach. Yeah. What's these parallels, Tim? We're noticing things. But like he refuses to go any further because it's getting dark soon, and they're all pissed about it. But he's really adamant. He pulls out a knife and makes it clear that he's not going any further. So he kind of leaves them stranded there, and they see the castle like sort of relatively nearby. And they basically debate, oh, should we go to the castle? Maybe we can stay there and spend the night. And they're like, no, what about this little hut, this little wood chipper's hut? It's like, yeah, and the ladies are both kind of like, that seems less scary. Let's do that. And it's like obviously very unappealing in every way. And so this carriage shows up with two horses, right? A coach and two horses. And I shit you not, the main young character, the young man, whose name I do not know for the life of me.
Mark.
What?
Mark?
It definitely wasn't Mark. Was it Charles? Charles sounds good. Yeah.
Xavier.
Shut up. But he goes up and he starts like petting the horses, and the older brother is like, like this is a bit weird. Like, why did this coach and two horses just show up out of nowhere with no driver? And he's like, don't look a gift horse in the mouth. He actually says that, especially when it's attached to a coach. So he actually decides to drive the coach himself with them, but almost immediately the horses just kind of take over, as if something magical's going on, where the horses take them to the castle, and this is never ever explained for the rest of the movie, because we get introduced to the human, the helper, right? The was it Clove? His name is. Yeah. But he shows up later. But like, it's not like he's driving the coach. No. The horses magically take them. Like, they just take them and they take over and drive them directly to the castle.
I mean, everyone knows that old vampire lore that they can control horses.
But Dracula's not alive yet. He's still dead.
Well, they can control him from death.
Oh, sure. Okay, fine.
It's Vampire 101.
Oh, is it? Is it Vampire 101?
You remember that episode of Buffy?
Where Spike controlled a horse? No, I do not. Yeah. I do not should know that. That's the hit television show Buffy the Vampire Slayer, for anyone who wasn't paying attention. But no, they get there, and they think it's kind of weird, but they go in, and it's like, okay, this is nice big posh mansion. Oh well, there's a dinner table, and there's 4 plates put out, as if they were expecting us, whoever lives here. And then they go snooping around the house, or the men do at least, and they find in the bedrooms like their luggage has been taken up, and like their pajamas have been laid out on the beds and everything. And they come back down, and the ladies get scared because we have this big moment where they see a shadow walking down the hall towards the dining hall, and then it looks kind of like it might be Christopher Lee, but then he steps into the light, and it's actually this Clove. And he's like, yes, my master, Count Dracula, has been dead, but he made it clear to always be welcoming to guests. And at no point did any of them ever ask, well, yeah, but like, why did the horses bring us here on their own? That's a little bit weird. Like, no one questions it. They're just kind of like that. Do you know what this is? This is a bunch of idiots who just don't question anything that is offered to them because it sounds good. They don't even think, oh, this may be too good to be true. Except the one woman who is constantly like, this is weird and creepy, what the hell? Like, why are we not questioning this more? If anything, she's almost like a meta character from like a modern time period who's like, this is silly. Why are we just accepting all this at face value? This is nuts. And the main guy, Charles, is like, let's just take advantage of this hospitality and enjoy ourselves and enjoy the dinner and enjoy these nice big comfy beds we're going to get.
Yeah, she was basically like the prototype for Randy from Scream. Like, she was the one that was being like, hey guys, can't you see we're in a horror movie?
Can't you see that we're in a Dracula's castle? We're in a vampire's home. Come on, like we're all going to die. She did go a little bit too far because, like I said, eventually at one point she actually said to her husband that she doesn't think they're going to make it till morning, and she ends up being right. Don't get me wrong, but when she says that, she's not really seen anything, in particular dangerous. They're not actually like life-threatening like situations yet, as far as they're aware. They're not seeing anything. So, but yeah, that takes up like the first like 25-30 minutes of the movie. Like everything I've just talked about and described is like this first 30 minutes. There's not much to it outside of them bickering about like, should we go, should we not, like, should we stay here, should we not. That's the movie up to this point.
Now, do you consider Clove to be like the Alfred to Dracula?
What do you think? He tries to like force him to eat when he's too focused on his work.
Yeah.
Sir, I've brought you a young wench from the tavern. You should feast. You should feast. You're going to get weak, sir.
I just want you to have a good life.
Yes.
Your parents would, your father would be so proud.
So they
and then he gets killed by Frankenstein or something.
Yeah, the older couple hear a noise. They see Clove moving a trunk. The husband follows down and tries to see what he can see. Clove, hits him from behind, hangs him upside down over Dracula's like empty grave, which is just filled with dust, and bleeds him over.
Remember from the first one that ended with him turning into dust.
Yes, although all blew away, so I'm skeptical as to how all this dust was brought back together in one place. But yeah,
some of it is probably like, there's probably like some cobwebs or cat litter that got brushed in there.
But so he gets like his throat slit over the thing. You do see the blood pouring down. You don't see the throat slit itself, but you see a lot of blood pouring down. Admittedly, it's that sort of like 60s blood that looks kind of fake. The movie 60 blood that looks a little bit too like paint. But you know what? I'll forgive that. I'll forgive it. But yeah, that's we see Dracula's skeleton kind of reform, and then it keeps fading until eventually he's a full-on Dracula again. I kind of like the shot of the hand coming up out of the crypt. Like you can just sort of see the hand coming out. It's just proper old school creepy horror movie stuff.
No, I thought this whole sequence was all right. Like, again, because of the time period, it's not like ultra violent, so it's not like he slits the throat and then blood starts gushing out. I mean, it's not like a Veronica or something. Where they slit the blood and it's just like squeezing it like a hose. I thought it was a pretty decent scene. Like, seeing him come back and then like you said, him kind of slowly rising from the crypt or the grave. That cool.
Veronica is what you chose to compare it to. That's what your mind went to immediately. Okay.
Yeah, I mean that famous scene with when they're doing the Elizabeth Bathory take where.
So, yeah, basically his wife is then sort of like tricked downstairs to go see her husband, and Dracula feeds on her. I mean, I like getting the impression that the servant had to bring her down to him because he's probably weak because he's just woken up after being dead. He's just been brought back to life. And later in the movie, the priest does kind of like explain that Dracula, he can be destroyed, but he'll never be dead. Like, you can sort of like kill him, but he'll always be able to come back. He always does that ability.
That's why there's so many Castlevania games.
Apparently so. Yeah, and at this point, I mean, that's what's kind of weird. The young couple kind of get up, and it feels like within 5 minutes they're talking about how it's almost dark again. Where I'm like, oh, daylight's going down. Now, let's quickly search the castle to see if we can find those other two scamps that have run off somewhere. What really broke my immersion here, though, is that when they end up like, so they confront, like, they see the vampire version of their lady friend, and then Dracula jumps out and he comes down and he's going to try and bite her, but then they sort of accidentally discover that their crosses burn them, so they're holding up their crosses to like keep them back. But when they go outside and they go on the run, Dracula goes outside and it's meant to be nighttime, but it's shot day for night, so it looks like it's still daytime. So Dracula walked outside and I went, wait, why is he okay? It looks sunny. What's going on? I just don't know. It was one of those things where like you really couldn't do this day for night. If you're going to do a movie about vampires, you can't fake it. You can't fake it because it just looks like they're out in sunlight and it ruins like the visual of it just looks wrong immediately.
Yes.
No thoughts? No. Talk about something while I go let the cat in.
No, I definitely agree. And what's funny is because like again the movie felt like it was dragging on for quite a bit. So when we get to this part and you have Dracula full on and they're fighting him, I kind of thought that this was the end of the movie. I was like, oh, okay, this must be like the final battle, because it just felt like the movie had dragged on for so much, and that something exciting was finally happening. That I was kind of surprised after it ended, and I was like, oh, we're gonna keep going. There's more.
Wishful thinking, probably on your part. Because this is the thing. Even when they pulled out the crosses in both Dracula and the woman who turned into a vampire, like both of them, like sort of like staying back in fear, just felt really goofy to me. It felt like everything you sort of make fun of when you're sort of like pretending or mocking vampire movies. You're like saying, the cross, take it away, hit me. You're like, I don't know.
Yeah.
So that was kind of, I don't know. Even this stuff felt a bit underwhelming to me. So it was like,
sure,
I'd sat through all the stuff that felt like it was dragging on, and then I got to here. I was like, okay, that wasn't even worth it. Like, what are we doing now? Luckily for them, the priest is just kind of waiting in the forest when they run into him. So they go to his monastery, and that sets up the last like half hour of the movie, give or take.
Yeah, like it's a shame because even this section still felt like it dragged on a little bit, because you have this Dracula fight scene that I'm like, oh, is this the end? And then it's like, okay, it's not the end, but now that we know, we have all our players, we know what's going on, we know what's at stake, if you know what I mean. Then like then I kind of figured like, oh, okay, so then now we're gonna get like a quick scene of them like, ramping up and getting ready, and then the final battle, but it still feels so draggy at this point.
Yeah, it's just the priest explaining things we mostly already know from the first movie. It's it introduces another character, basically a Renfield type character who happens to be at the monastery, because the whole idea is that he's going to be the one who has to let them in, because Dracula can't get in without an invite. He opens up for them, and the idea that Dracula's coming for Charles's wife Diana, because she was about to be a victim, and then they fought back with crosses. So because he lost his prey, now he's fixated on her. He has to get her, right? He's got this drive to get to her.
Which again feels like very like trying to redo the original.
Yeah,
Dracula.
I just like, because he gets into a room with her, because the Renfield type character like sort of like tricks her into a locked room with him. But and he opens up his like shirt and he cuts himself as if he wants her to take her blood, but it kind of just cuts away, and then almost immediately we end up at a point where they're fleeing the scene, and like the human, his human like familiar Clove, he's like driving the coach. It's daytime. I will say this: all the days seem really short in this movie. Like it seems to always be back to like almost nighttime again. Like, oh, we're losing light. Where it's almost nighttime.
I don't know if you missed it, but at the start of the movie, they did mention it was daylight savings time.
Oh, very good. Very funny.
Thanks.
Yes, because did they even have daylight savings time in 1890? Was that a thing?
Who knows?
But like, yeah, so they're in pursuit, and the whole idea is if they can get to the coffins before it hits, nighttime, they can stake. And luckily, like, yeah, he has like Diana in like the coffin like next to him, but when they open the coffin, she's still human. Like, she's not a vampire yet. Like, so he just chose not to bite her and like run off. Like, why?
Yeah,
he had her in a room. Why didn't he bite her? I don't know. It just it's just randomly that way so that she can still be saved at the end. It felt like a bit of a cheat. Dracula's coffin, though, when they get to the castle, the carriage kind of like crashes and he slides off onto the ice in the little sort of moat that the castle has, and he gets and it's like, okay, so she's okay. Charles, I'm going to go and kill the vampire, and he sort of walks onto the ice and he's kind of careful because it's kind of cracking under his feet, but it's too late, even though it still looks like daytime to us. But again, day for night, it doesn't look that good. It's the fundamental flaw. But Dracula springs up out of the coffin, and this is where Diana shoots the ice. Dracula freaks out because there's running water, and the priest is like, "Oh yeah, it's running water. Of course, he can't cross running water." So he just keeps like shooting bits of the ice until eventually falls in. And it looks like he drowns almost, although I guess that's not technically true because he doesn't need to breathe. So I guess it's more just that, like, running water's a problem, but it's not really running water anymore once he's in the water. It's just
That's true.
a body of water. At which point, like, is he just okay until, like, once he washes ashore, is that just him fine and he can get up? I mean, I don't know. We'll find out how he comes back next time, I guess. But I don't think I was... Because actually, it starts rolling credits, like, super quickly here. Like, it literally cuts to a shot of him in the water, looking kind of dead, and the credits just start rolling. And I'm like, oh, okay, all right. All of a sudden, it was done.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of weird. I do like the idea of the ending, like the idea of, okay, you can't cross running water, so like, if he's on ice and then you gotta shoot it to basically like trap him between all this running water. Like I think that is a pretty interesting idea. I would say watching the movie, it comes off like kind of cheesy. Because I mean, first of all, like it's pretty convenient that there just happens to be ice here. Like it never really seemed like it was cold in the movie before. Like I never thought like, oh, is this like winter time when things would be frozen over and stuff?
Winter is typically when things are frozen over. Yes.
Yeah, like, but I don't know. Like I never got that impression that it was about that time of year. Like it's not like people were walking around in coats or things were snowing or whatever. So there's that, and then yeah, like it's obviously very like stage ice, and then it's another thing where again, I think the idea is interesting, but once you actually see it, it is kind of goofy, like Dracula being on the ice, kind of like slipping, like
it all feels very pantomime. The ice, like you say. I mean, I don't want to give it too much shit for this because it's an older movie, but it does look really fake when it breaks apart. It looks like it's just it's been
styrofoam.
Yeah, it looks like obviously this cut was already there, and it kind of like, I'm not sure why shooting the ice creates a perfect line as if it's been snapped. It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. It just kind of feels like a lot of really cheesy stuff, before the effects and stuff. And it's not like I'm talking about we need CG for these things. It's more just that the practical effects and like the art of effects hadn't really reached the point of like say the 70s and 80s where things really started to look great. From what they were doing, and I think for the most part that's okay. You work around what you can't do. But I feel like there's moments like this where it feels like this didn't work. This didn't look good, and the day for night stuff really bothers me because it's just like it's really. I mean, I always hate it anyway, but it's really stupid in a vampire movie because it just looks like the vampires walking about in daytime.
Man, I forget what it was that I watched this month, but I watched something that was like so painfully bad. Where it was like, oh, actually, you know what it was? Actually, was that at the start of the month? It might have been actually right before the month started, but I was watching Cruel Jaws, aka Jaws 5, this really bad shark movie, where they would have like characters running around the beach at night, and it was like so obvious that it was just day for night. It was just like the worst looking like blue filter to try to make everything look nice. It was so bad.
Yeah. I feel bad sometimes. Like this is one of these movies where I come into the episode, I come into the review, and I'm just like, I don't know if I have anything super exciting to really say about this. There's only so many ways you can kind of explain why it feels so dull and why the characters aren't engaging and why there's no tension and why it just feels like a rehash of the first movie, but with, I don't know, less spark, less charisma, less heart. Like it's tough to do, and we get here to the end of the plot, and I'm just kind of like, like there wasn't a whole lot of struggle. There wasn't a whole lot of like it didn't feel like things were ramping up towards the end. It felt like it was just kind of like, oh, it's time to do the end scene now. It's time to do the chase. It's time to do the scene where Dracula comes through a window and almost gets her but doesn't quite. Stuff like that.
Yeah, it doesn't feel very inspired. Kind of seems like everything was just playing it safe. Like weren't really trying to rock the boat or do anything too crazy or original with it. It's just like, paint by numbers Dracula. Like, all right, we're just doing Dracula again, loosely tying it into the first movie. And and those movies that are just kind of dull and boring, it's usually a little harder to talk about. There's not as much interesting stuff to say.
Yeah, there's no wacky characters or really stupid
Yeah.
dialogue to point out or anything like that. Some stupid decisions in this, which we kind of mentioned, but for the most part, it's one of those things where it's not like they're making really absurd individual decisions. It's just a lot of like feeling slightly off. Like the characters are just very movie character like in the sense that they keep making decisions because the script needs them to do certain things, and none of them are completely like ultra silly on their own. But there's just always this feeling of no, these are movie characters, so they're going to just accept that they're going into this mansion for to get a free night and a free meal, without ever questioning why, as if this is a normal thing. And that's just something that feels really common to me in a lot of these movies set in this time period, made in this era from the Hammer stuff. Is that there's so many like stories of like people just being given shelter and like dinner and stuff as if it's expected to do for like strangers passing by and stuff like that. I don't know. It's one of those weird things. But yeah, it's a bland sequel that just kind of repeats a lot of the stuff from the first movie, and there's not really a whole lot of exciting things to really talk about with it. I was expecting to like this more than Brides of Dracula, and I actually think I like it less just because at least there was weird things in that. At least there was stuff to talk about. Like there was actually a couple of exciting moments towards the end of that movie that we talked about. This just kind of exists.
Yeah.
And the fact that I couldn't even name you a single one of the human characters outside of Clove is probably quite telling.
Yeah.
So, all right, on you go then, Tim. What are you going to rate it?
I think maybe I'll give it a 4.5. Yeah, unfortunately, it's really dull and slow. But I mean, it's definitely not the worst thing in the world. Like I wouldn't say it like angered me. Is more just again just kind of bored me. But I mean the few things though that like I did like even though he's not in it a ton, I still love Christopher Lee, and seeing him show up at any time is pretty fun. And then the few vampire bits you get here and there, like as cheesy as it was, I thought there was some charm to it. The other woman, the redhead that gets turned into a vampire when she's like running around baring her fangs, and kind of has these like very noticeable like makeup bite marks on her neck, like as cheesy as it is, like that stuff still entertained me enough that like I can't give it like a super bad score or anything, like. But yeah, I guess 4.5, like just kind of, below the middle line.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't make me angry either. It's apathy, and in some ways that's worse because it didn't make me feel anything all on board.
Sure. That's true.
So I'll probably go with a straight 4, just a straight 4 out of 10. Yeah, it's not a painful watch in the sense that if you put it on while you're doing something else, it's fine. Like it's not, but yeah.
Can't imagine like revisiting it that often.
Nah. Hopefully the sequels after this get a bit weirder. If not good, at least weirder, so that there's more to kind of sink your teeth into, for lack of a better expression. So.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still, like when we did the first movie, I kind of mentioned like, the Hammer movies are a very big blind spot for me. I haven't seen that many of them, and I always heard like really good things, like that the Hammer movies are held in high regard, and I mean so far out of everything we watched, I haven't really like been too enthused about it. Like they're not the most horrible things in the world, but it's still not hasn't really gotten me to be like, oh my god, like, yes, Hammer movies, please.
Yeah, I mean, I like the first one quite a bit, but it's definitely a case of like they made a lot of movies, so there's gems throughout, but there's a lot of rough stuff. But, so I mean, we'll see as we do more. When we eventually finish the Dracula Hammer franchise, maybe we'll start up one of the other ones and sort of go down the Frankenstein path or down the whatever path and see what they're doing. They have a lot of standalone stuff as well, though, so it's not just the big classic monsters. All right, if you made it this far into the review, put the words, I don't know, sucking. Put the word sucking into the comments on YouTube. I'm going to make Tim do his pose for the thumbnails. So 3, 2, 1, pause. All right, I like it. I like it. Very good. So you can, of course, let us know what you thought of the movie if you've seen it in the comments below, so please do. We mentioned Patreon earlier. We mentioned liking and all that stuff earlier, so please do all those things. Ding the bell for notifications, of course, if you want to on YouTube. Catch us on Twitter at Screams Midnight. There's a lot of fun posts on there, and you get updates as well as just some random stuff. So do follow us on there. Otherwise, though, not much to say other than we are banking a lot of episodes for the first few months of 2021 because Tim's going to be on paternity leave. So this is kind of part of that. So expect kind of more theme months. This is vampire month. We're going to have a werewolf month and a zombie month coming up as well. So nice mix of stuff coming up over the next few months to tide you over in these early months of what hopefully is the year where we transition from pandemic world into non-pandemic world. But I mean, maybe that's too optimistic, but we'll see how it goes. But yeah, so that has been Dracula, Prince of Darkness. Unfortunately, not the best movie in the world. I mean, we've definitely seen worse. I mean, just goes back through the catalogue. We've definitely seen much worse.
Sure.
But that
certainly
is
not my favorite Prince of Darkness movie.
Oh, definitely not. I love Carpenter's Prince of Darkness with a passion. So no complaints from me on that. But yes, so thank you once again for watching or listening. We always appreciate it. Keep watching scary movies, and we will see you next time.